Welcome to the K in Clarity podcast. I'm the host, Mezue. During this episode, we're joined by Brian Shields, founder of KOL Pulse. Brian Shields has been instrumental in advancing healthcare intelligence and real-time sentiment analysis within the pharmaceutical and oncology space. Through KOL Pulse AI, Shields developed an advanced AI platform that curates, tracks, and analyzes key opinion leader, social media discussions, and clinical trial sentiment, allowing professionals rapid access to nuanced insights and trends in oncology and beyond. Shields' expertise in digital health platforms comes from decades in biotech and pharma, with a focus on providing transparency and accessibility of key opinion leader data for medical affairs, pharma executives, and clinicians. His hands-on approach to curation, user-focused AI development, and commitment to accurate data have positioned him as a recognized innovator, driving better decision-making for healthcare professionals. Shields' leadership ensures healthcare researchers and stakeholders can quickly leverage the power of curated insights, helping shape strategic clinical and marketplace responses to emerging technologies and research. In this conversation, we discussed the transformative potential of AI in oncology, emphasizing the importance of digital opinion leaders and patient advocacy. He shares his personal journey as a whistleblower in the pharmaceutical industry, highlights the challenges and the lessons learned. Lastly, the discussion also touches on the influence of money in healthcare, the role of technology in improving patient care, and the future of AI in oncology. If this is your first time tuning in, here's the gist. The healthcare industry is buzzing with innovations, but there's a lot of noise and misconceptions out there. That's where we come in. Because of my experience in the healthcare ecosystem, I've gained a unique vantage point into the industry's inner workings. We're bringing you the conversations that typically happen behind boardrooms and strategy sessions, the real challenges, innovative solutions, and game-changing insights that are reshaping healthcare as we know it. On this podcast, we're bringing you face-to-face with the industry-leading healthcare founders, executives, and innovators. We're talking about the nitty-gritty of building and scaling healthcare companies, the hurdles they've overcome, and the strategies that have led to their success. More importantly, we dive into the personal challenges that come with trying to change a system as complex as U.S. healthcare. So whether you're a healthcare entrepreneur, a medical professional, or just someone passionate about the future of healthcare, this podcast is your backstage pass to the minds shaping the industry. Now let's have Brian tell us a little bit about themselves. Welcome, Brian, to the K in Clarity podcast. For the people listening, can you give a brief overview of who you are and what it is you do?
Sure. My name's Brian Shields. I live in Savannah, Georgia. I am the CEO of KOL Pulse, which is a website that I've developed where I share AI tools to help people follow the key opinion leader conversations in oncology. So I try to use the different tools as they come out, customize the tools to help doctors and other people that are interested in oncology research learn from the social media discussions on the various clinical trials that are happening, at the major medical conferences. Prior to this, to starting my own company, I was in pharma for a few years. I was a sales representative for Eli Lilly, sales rep with Genentech. I did marketing at Genentech, and I was a sales manager at Eli Lilly as well. I had been working in oncology since about 2000. So I've been in oncology for a long time. And during that time, I was actually a whistleblower against a drug called Tarceva when I was with Genentech. And if you Google whistleblower Tarceva, you'll learn a little more about me, I guess. Before that, I was a helicopter pilot in the Army, and I attended West Point and grew up in Staten Island.
Yeah, this is when we first had our conversation. I just want to let everybody know it's not where I thought things were going to go, but it became very interesting. So we're glad to have you on. But usually the way that we like to do things is that we have an icebreaker question first. Okay. And so before we dive into, the meat and potatoes, the whistleblower journey and everything else, if you could answer this question, if you could instantly connect with every new diagnosed cancer patient with a single resource, whether it be a doctor, technology, or a piece of advice, what would it be and why?
I think the piece of advice that I would give would be to identify the patient digital opinion leader within the cancer that you have. If it's breast cancer, lung cancer, identify that person and reach out to them. Reach out, get a relationship with them on, in a DM, maybe in Twitter, or get their email, because these people are amazing folks and they've dedicated their lives to helping patients like yourself. And they're open to questions you may have and they'll guide you in the right direction. So I think that's what I would do. I think like in lung cancer, Jill Feldman is an incredible advocate and she works with the top researchers in lung cancer, goes to meetings with them. She actually talks with them almost like on a peer level. She has tremendous access to what these folks are working on. So that's what I would do. I would reach out to someone like in lung cancer, Jill Feldman, and then get the best and most local resources you can to support yourself. That's what I would do. I think that would be like a cheat code because those folks are really, not only do they want to help you, I mean, they've dedicated their lives to helping you, but they've got access to the top doctors in the various oncology specialties too.
Okay. Okay. Well, you started your healthcare journey in analytics and sales for companies, as you mentioned, like Eli Lilly and Genentech, particularly working across, diabetes, oncology, and targeted therapies. I guess, how did those formative experiences really shape your understanding of the pharmaceutical and healthcare ecosystem?
Sure. Think I think starting out as a sales rep and then coming inside, kind of being a number cruncher, and then going back out as a sales manager, where you see, you're in the field every day pretty much working with sales reps and physicians. So when you're a sales rep, the doctors, it's kind of a real experience because if they don't want to talk to you, they don't talk to you. If they want to talk, sometimes they want to talk a lot. And sometimes they just want you to make sure you add value when you visit them. But I think what you learn from that is that these doctors are really busy people. They're focused on their patients, and that's the rhythm of their life. When you go inside and you're looking at analytics or you're looking at market research or you're looking at different charts that show what doctors think, I think you become disconnected from the reality of what's happening in the waiting room when patients are sitting there and kind of experiencing the anxiety before they see the doctor or dealing with the staff or when they get back in there in the exam room and having that discussion with the doctor. The doctors will share some of those discussions with you when you're a sales rep and you learn a lot about how they are as people versus, the stats around how marketers like to think about drugs and how patients get value from drugs. When you talk to a doctor as a sales rep, you learn about really I guess, the personal aspect of what they deal with. And I think that's really important. And I think that I started out with that as my base in healthcare. And I think that's what's helped me out because I think I never, that perspective has never left me.
After your time at Genentech, right, you became a whistleblower, an experience that I would say led to many years of personal and professional upheaval. How did that even happen in the first place? And, what were the key issues you exposed? And really, what even motivated you to take such a big risk?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's funny when you're a whistleblower, there's a group called Taxpayers Against Fraud. It's like the lobby, maybe the lobby or the bar group, I guess, for whistleblower attorneys, and they're pretty supportive of whistleblowers like myself. So they kind of get us together every once in a while on conference Zoom calls, or every once in a while we get together for a live event too. We go meet somewhere and go out to dinner and stuff. And when we talk to whistleblowers, you feel you're kind of like it's like you're meeting this strange bird that you didn't think existed besides yourself. Like you just like you and you feel like you're when you're talking to them, you feel like you're talking to yourself. because it's a very lonely role, and it isn't like you just say, "I'm a whistleblower." You actually are you're a whistleblower before that because people kind of pigeonhole you or they shun you, and that's what kinda drives you to become a whistleblower. You've identified something that you think is wrong that you're trying to fix, and then kind of the system, I would say, for lack of a better term, kinda gangs up on you. They don't wanna hear from you anymore, and then your friends kinda don't wanna be your friends anymore, your boss doesn't want you on their team anymore, and the organization just wants you to go. That's kind of the experience of a whistleblower, and it starts out with you thinking you're right and everybody else is wrong, and it's actually a pretty lonely position to be in, and a lot of people are in those positions all the time, and you have a successful situation like I did, I guess, you just end up becoming a disgruntled employee, you know? That's what it like, the difference between a whistleblower and a disgruntled employee is just really luck of the draw, I would say. It's sad. It's kinda sad, but that's kind of the way it is. I think what got me there was I was a marketer for Tarceva, and I went to a conference where they were talking about I mean, they literally were calling Tarceva the Lazarus effect. They were showing how patients who had, late stage lung cancer, EGFR mutation lung cancer, and really bad performance status, so they were hospital ridden. This was like they're I think they were even on hospice care. They were given Tarceva, and a significant amount of them were up walking in a week, and it was because they had the mutation, and I think that was sort of, uh, eye-opening for me when I went to this conference. I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm at this conference, nobody's calling any other drug a Lazarus effect." I mean, Lazarus effect is like a pretty profound statement coming from lung cancer experts, and I think in this case, the doctor who wrote the editorial calling it the Lazarus effect was Dr. Corey Langer, who's one of the top lung cancer experts like in the world. So they don't throw that term around, with any old drug or any old situation. So when I came back inside to the home office, I was like, what are we doing about this EGFR mutation story and Tarceva? And I went down a path to sort of incorporate that into the physician education materials I was developing. And then I just felt like I kept getting for some reason, I had roadblocks were being put in front of me. And then I started to question really the overall strategy. I was like, how can we ignore this Lazarus effect in our marketing? It didn't make any sense to me. And then the more I kept pushing, the more I kind of got driven out of the department and then eventually driven out of the company and then am isolated and isolated. And then finally you like, what route do I have? Do I just quit and move on? Or do I contact a whistleblower attorney and decide to go down that path with the government? And that's the path I went down. But as someone who dealt with this, I feel for people who deal with these situations every day, whether it's, in my case, a pharma drug, but when people are in their job, a lot of times they identify something they think is wrong and they try to fight that battle to do the right thing. And for one reason or another, our organizations or our corporate structures are not set up to hear you out. They're more set up to kind of drive you out.
Mm.
It's interesting. I've become very critical of and skeptical of consensus-based cultures. That's one thing I learned from being a whistleblower. I'm extremely skeptical of consensus because I think consensus drives away. It sort of can be used as a way of intimidating whistleblowers or people who are trying to just identify something and do the right thing. The consensus can kind of eat them up a lot.
What was the decision making process like? Did you speak to your wife? How did you really go through this to know that you were going to take that risk?
Yeah, I spoke a lot with my wife and she was really supportive of me throughout the whole process. But I think probably the biggest decision was, the thing is, you don't know because it was like me versus everybody in this big corporation, right? And me versus all these doctors that speak on behalf of this corporation, right? So it's like you're saying I'm special, I'm smarter than all these brilliant people, right? So you need to give yourself sort of I needed like a check, like, am I crazy here or not? What I did, so the check for me was my dad. My dad is a Vietnam vet from Brooklyn. We grew up in Staten Island, and he's kind of a, a salt of the earth guy. Just matter, I don't say matter of fact, but just, he's a hard worker, but he's not a doctor. He doesn't have like a PhD in microbiology. He's a patient, a dad, a husband, a father. He's just a normal guy that did his job every day. And so I asked him, I said, Dad, and I had a ton of respect for him. He has a great moral code. So I said, Dad, I got this situation at work, and, it looks like the drug works for a specific group of people, and the data shows that, but we're not marketing it to those people, and we're actually discouraging the marketing to those people. So the right patients are not getting the right drug. And he's like, well, you can't let them get away with this. You got to do something. And that was it. That was kind of what really pushed me to making the decision to go down this path of working with the government as a whistleblower and working with my attorneys. Yeah, it was my dad. I thought I had gotten beaten up a lot internally about this. So I was like, am I even in the right frame of mind? Like, am I just crazy? And my dad like, no, you're not only not crazy, but you need to do this. People need this to be done. And that was kind of, and I think everyone needs someone like that in their life to kind of, give them a reality check sometimes. Cause I think sometimes we get caught up in our head or caught up in the experiences that we've been dealing with. And sometimes we just need, a fresh set of eyes to look at it. And it was my dad who really kind of, you know, prompted me to go down the path and be a whistleblower.
What were maybe Genentech's possible motivations in not wanting to educate or market those deliveries of different types of patient lives, and how they could actually have been, helping them? What was maybe the reasons, and maybe from there, how leaders, founders, executives can really learn through those motivations and how they can actually build better organizations, right? That produce a better culture where people can speak about their opinion and actually bring changes, and actually feel like they're being impactful in their work.
I mean, I've been reflecting on this a lot. The thing about an FDA approval is it's fairly permanent. Right? It's a big deal. So they had an FDA approval based on a randomized phase 3 trial called BR21. And that's your approval, right? So based on that approval, the FDA says you can market this drug to these doctors based on this label, and you run with that, right? I think in retrospect, if you look at that trial, the trial was significantly flawed based on the biomarker analysis they did, based on I mean, there are letters to the editor in the BR21 publication in New England Journal of Medicine where doctors out of Memorial Sloan Kettering, top doctors in lung cancer and biomarker analysis out of Japan had written back saying, your data doesn't look good. So there's this sort of, when the FDA approves a phase 3 trial, for a drug, we treat that whole thing as almost like, like something that's set in stone, right? It can't be wrong. It's a phase 3 trial. The FDA approved it. Well, the reality is the whole thing was a mess, really, for patients in lung cancer. It was a total disaster. But, people hang on that. Then companies have to deal with whole entire portfolios of drugs. Avastin was another drug Genentech had at the time, too. When you have a phase 3 trial that goes through the FDA and gets approved, I don't know the process of going to the FDA saying, you know what, we don't think that's a good approval, so let's change that. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So I don't want to pick on Genentech or the FDA, but that whole thing was a disaster. And it's a disaster that, to be honest with you, I think a lot of folks aren't talking about. They're not identifying that we had this decade pretty much of, it's I'm trying to, it's like the Middle Ages. I mean, it's like we were treating patients with leeches almost. It was total backwards, treatment. You've got a targeted therapy, the target, yet you're treating people without the target with the therapy. and you're discouraging the testing of patients who have the target. It was it's totally backwards. And that happened for about a decade. So why would Genentech do that? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, they've got public statements that said everything they did was proper. So I guess everything they did was proper, but proper was a disaster for patients. So anyway, I mean, but I'd like for more physicians to start asking these questions, or regulators to ask these questions. How did this happen? It didn't just squeak through. It squeaked through, and then billions of dollars were made, and patients were treated for like a decade or more based on this. And then it has a lag effect because doctors weren't, there was a lag effect where doctors were not testing for mutations for a while because they had been detailed for a decade that said it didn't matter. So you've got to fight that sort of disinfo that happened. Yeah, I don't. Why did Genentech do this? I don't know. I have no idea. You know, I think a lot of people should start asking that question of the senior leaders at the time. Like, how did this guy Brian figure this out, but you couldn't figure this out? It doesn't. I don't know. That's something that I have a hard time figuring out.
Yeah. And I think the way that you kind of presenting it, the important factors that really matter is, hey, what are your incentives, right? What are your systems that allow, others to make choices within a certain environment? As you mentioned, others are not going to be able to, hey, actually, I think you did this wrong, right? To the FDA because, there's time, there's money cost, you're losing with competitors, might be a reputational stain as well, right? Maybe even someone at the FDA might, not look upon your company favorably. So there's all these other factors that produce this incentive and environment for nobody to squeal, basically. And I think that's something that maybe, as you're mentioning, leaders should think in mind of, hey, what can we actually do? And there's a lot to think through. That takes time and it takes a lot of care and dedication to actually think through that. But I think it's something important. And of course, you're never going to catch everything. But trying to build that in and maybe even incentivizing the team to do that, I think that's something important, like you're mentioning.
Yeah, and just to on that note, I think the legal system protects shareholders in the United States more than patients. So Genentech had an FDA approval for Tarceva, and then they had an FDA approval for Avastin in lung cancer as well. So they had Avastin in the first line setting, Tarceva in the second line setting, and then Avastin was, lung cancer was sort of like the forefront of expanding into multiple tumor types. They call it the pan tumor strategy. So then Avastin started being, colorectal cancer, breast cancer. They were in renal cancer, glioblastoma. I mean, it's, Avastin's used throughout, but, sort of a backbone treatment of cancer would be lung cancer. That's something that doctors associate with efficacy. If your drug works in lung cancer, it must be efficacious. So they had, they had a portfolio within lung cancer they had to manage. So to what extent would Tarceva have impacted that portfolio? It's an interesting question to ask, and I think it makes you wonder, like, are there corporate reasons why perhaps you don't go run into the FDA and say, you know what, I don't know if that indication's that good. Let's figure this stuff out. I don't know. I wonder even legally if our legal system is set up to discourage that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just wondering about that because shareholders have so many protections. I don't know what the case like could a if a corporate officer did what I did, you know, would they be in trouble with shareholders? I don't know. I don't I don't know how that goes, but I just know the whole thing didn't work. The whole process didn't work.
Yeah,
I just know
abs-
that.
absolutely. Absolutely. Can you also describe what it was like to rebuild your career after leaving Genentech and living through that whistleblower process and journey? I know you mentioned the isolation, even losing friends, losing coworkers, and maybe even people that you think of as good people or people that's supposed to be on your side, and good when I say that, quote unquote, you never know, that are supposed to be through your side, maybe, are helping you, but it's not the case. And funny enough, just to add to that, I was watching a video yesterday where there was somebody, I don't know if this is true, but it was being reported on that he was getting paid 100K in the NIH but he was a whistleblower, but he was pretty much ostracized and he was doing nothing, but they're just keeping him there. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
through that journey, can you really speak about how you really rebuilt everything and really what were the lessons or skills that helped you get back on your feet? Because that's a lot to go through, right? Financial pressure, mental
Yeah.
pressure, maybe even a physical toll, right? And you have a family. And so what was that all like?
Yeah, I think I mean back then I was coaching my daughter's sports teams. I was a pretty engaged father. So I think that helped me a lot. I landed a few good clients just in my digital healthcare startup that I started back then. So I think that was I really wasn't like, because this was when the gears switched, when my whistleblower case was public, that's when it got a little weird and a little tougher in the industry because, people, you're whistleblowers. Who in pharma wants to hire a whistleblower? That's like it's like inviting a vampire to your home, Why would you want to it doesn't make any sense. So I had to deal with that, and I'm sort of still professionally dealing with that now, and I'm trying to embrace it a little bit more because, it's tough when you wanna be yourself, um, and it's, in an industry where they don't like whistleblowers, so it's challenging right now, to be honest with you. Before it was public, you're kind of like undercover. So, you know, you're you're doing your best to keep things quiet because your case is under seal. But once it's public, well, then you have to figure out what to do and how to move on with life. It's tough because basically it's like taking your whole network of people, with the exception of a few select people that are really loyal or that can look past the stuff, and it's like taking your whole network and just like the whole network just leaves you like in one swoop. Nobody wants to be around you anymore. So if you look at if nobody wants to you're someone that they associate with negative memories, to be honest with you. Because, a lot of them had, how many people go through life with never having an FBI interview? Most people. Well, most of my network had an FBI interview because of me, right? And I prepped the FBI or the DOJ for those interviews. So I was guiding that. As a whistleblower, that's what they ask you to do. You've got to work with the government on their case. I don't know. I mean, those are kind of visceral moments for people, and I don't know that willing to dissociate those moments from me, or to think that what I did was right, like because they were scared, probably. They're dealing with corporate attorneys and things like that. So anyway, it's a tough situation. Um, I don't know. I think all whistleblowers deal with it and you try to go in another direction. But it's weird. Like, I'm still in oncology. I come across the people that I worked with at Genentech, and a lot of them are senior execs in other companies now too. So, I have to learn how to get along, and it's been a long time, but the bottom line is I think what I did was right. What they think is really not my problem. And it kind of took me a while to get there. As far as like how did I take care of myself personally, I think when you're a whistleblower, you're kind of in this constant case of roller coaster anxiety. Your lawyer calls, you sneak out, you get on the call, the DOJ is right there. You're hoping that this is gonna improve your case, and then you sneak back into whatever job you're doing, you get back on the computer, and then you know, you deal with that for, like, 6 years. So it's kinda crazy, and then the 6 years is over, and you think that you're at the end of the rainbow with a pot of gold, and you think life's gonna be easy again, or life's gonna be and it's not that easy. Life's life. So I think what it taught me was to value every day, value every interaction with your family and friends. Because I think when you're a whistleblower, you think, "Well, it's all gonna be better soon." It doesn't really get better. Like, life is life, you have to live your life, and I think that's probably what I've learned the hard way, and like you said earlier, you have to take care of your health. Like, I've lost weight, I've gained weight, now I'm kind of in better shape than I've been in a while. But that a lot of that is the mental aspect of dealing with all this anxiety and frustrations of being a whistleblower. And anyone in the world deals with these things. But I think when you're putting yourself in these situations of intense sort of isolation or mental isolation from your friends, like you've got to really be emotionally strong and take care of yourself physically. I don't think I did that great of a job as a whistleblower, but I'm trying to do a better job of that now based on what I've learned.
Yeah, I think the point that you spoke on that I want to touch upon, right, is how even negative memories make certain people not want to be attached to you, which I would say is not always fair, but I think it's also hard to detach, hey, when I was with this person, this is what happened. That was bad to me. But I think, sometimes it's not always about the self. It's, how you guys both might be able to process the journey, right? Obviously, it depends on, how deep your relationship is. And I'm thinking of a particular scenario here, but I think when you can go through sometimes negative memories and negative emotions, those are things that can actually make the human bond prosper even more and continue to grow. So I think that's somewhat unfair, but I'm glad that you were able to go through such a mentally turmoil time and actually come out from it. But I think based upon, how you mentioned everything as kind of feel like an undercover cop, working with DOJ for years. How did this really affect your perspective on industry ethics and as well as in your future work in healthcare?
Yeah. So I think that well, it's really well. I guess going back to what I said earlier about those letters to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine about the biomarker analysis in that BR21 trial. So these are the top thought leaders really in this space at the time. Pretty much wrote a letter that this trial was bogus. Like the data is bogus. We don't believe any of it for these reasons, and they said it professionally. And that got swept under the rug. It didn't even matter. Now, the other thing that I wanted to share was based on that data, the company had a statement to investors, like in an SEC document that said EGFR mutation is not the story. And it was based on that data. And they totally ignored the fact that there were these, maybe they didn't know there were these letters to the editor, but there was no balanced opinion on that. Now with key opinion leaders discussing data in real time, it's instant. You've got tweets, you've got podcasts, you've got Substacks, you've got YouTubes. If there's something that doctors think is wrong about a trial, you're going to hear about it really fast. And that's what I really enjoy about what I'm doing now with KOL Pulse. So that's probably my biggest learning. The other thing that I learned was the freedom of speech rights of a pharma company are immense. And this is something I learned as a whistleblower, and whistleblowers learn this when you deal with the DOJ. Um, there was this legal case back in the day, maybe a decade or so ago, where a rep was creating their own sales brochures, selling like a fish oil supplement. And the FDA was going to arrest the guy. I think they did arrest him. They arrested the sales rep. Well, the pharma company came in and defended the sales rep on freedom of speech grounds. And the FDA had to totally reverse everything because the rep was just sharing public data. What so this case has set a precedent in pharma where if a pharma company discusses data that's in public, that's in the research, that's in papers, well, they've got a high freedom of speech right to do so. And which means it's really hard to blow the whistle because a lot of the times the companies will have publication strategies where they're the ones pumping the data in the free speech world. You know what I mean? So they control the data being pumped into the free speech, and then they talk about the data that's in the free speech. So I guess what I'm getting at is the companies have tremendous power over medical information, tremendous power, frightening level of power. And I think up until recently, with this growth of digital opinion leader content and digital opinion leader discussions, that power that pharma had was unchallenged. I think really the only thing challenging it to some extent is this open, organic digital opinion leader discussion. That's probably the thing I learned. I think, though, the other thing I learned is I think a lot of folks in healthcare are impacted by the money. The money's all with pharma. If you're a company, small company, an agency, the easiest way to make money is get a pharma client Same with a doctor that needs to do research. Their academic center wants research, they have to work with pharma. If a doctor wants to be a consultant, a speaker, they have to work with pharma. So pharma is so powerful on so many levels. So I think when we look at like conflicts of interest and transparency around finances, financial payments and things like that, I think a lot of doctors would be quick to say that they're not influenced by the money, but I think they're definitely influenced by the money. It may be subtle. It may be, well, my lab is doing a trial with this company, so maybe I don't want to criticize them on a tweet. Or maybe I'm doing a podcast for a publication and, I want them to think highly of me, so I'll be a little bit over the top maybe and maybe give a little bit more of a sales pitch in this. I think those are the things. There's subtle aspects of conflicts of interest that I think doctors are a bit too quick to dismiss, and I think they should own it a little bit more. That's something I learned because like I said, when I was a whistleblower, I was like, "Why how could all these doctors be speaking for this company when they go to a meeting and they're saying the opposite at the meeting? It doesn't make
Mm,
any sense to me."
mm.
Right? So that's kind of how I level set it in my mind. Maybe they didn't mean to do something wrong, but I think the impacts of money on influence is very subtle, especially in healthcare.
During that difficult time, you had mentioned that you advised a friend when we spoke with lung cancer on how to actually get expert care, which ultimately saved her life, which is a miraculous thing. How did that experience really shape your views on the value of knowledge sharing, patient advocacy, and really connecting with top clinicians?
Well, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, that was like right in the midst of my whistleblower case. I was just getting going with it. I was in sort of I don't know, like the foxholes of being a whistleblower. And I had a friend call me from Florida and she asked me to, she knew I was working in cancer and lung cancer, and she wanted some advice, and I was going through all of this at the time. It was almost like, well, like you said, I mean, I guess to some extent, I mean, the doctor saved her life, the drug saved her life, and she saved her own life because she had to become her own advocate and go see the various specialists around the country and look into joining an early stage clinical trial and then travel to get that treatment. So my friend is really the hero in all of this. She just, put on that like superwoman cape and flew, fighting for her life the whole time. It's amazing. I think for me, it kind of like I feel like it's almost like a gift from God, like to include me in this opportunity to help someone. So I don't know. That's kind of like a life-changing part of my life. Like I guess when these doctors treat patients, they get to save people all the time. When you're just a regular Joe, you don't get a chance to, I don't wanna say I did the same, but to make it to have a part in that special moment. So, that was a big deal, but what I learned was the doctors at that top level of oncology are years ahead. I would almost say decades ahead, maybe a decade ahead, especially the ones who are dealing with early phase 1 trials. They're dealing with drugs that aren't gonna be on the market for, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And they're seeing things, they're making observations, they're picking up on the patterns where these drugs work and the patterns in different patients, the patterns with biomarkers, they're all of those things. And these doctors are brilliant on top of that. So it's like these geniuses have access to these incredible drugs and all the diagnostics. And if you could get into that mix, I think there's a better, especially for, some of these advanced diseases that maybe you're looking at a year survival, something like that. You don't have that much time to run because the disease is going to hit you eventually and then you're going to slow down. You're not going to be able to fly somewhere else to do a clinical trial or do those things. You're going to lose energy. So I think, I don't know, I think for some of these, a lot of the doctors will say, for some of these diseases, the first line of therapy should be a clinical trial. And I think I believe that more now than ever, especially for some of the diseases that, like I said, the survival benefit's not great. I think get access to one of these experts and get access to clinical trials. The sad thing is you could be on, I mean, if you're on the standard of care or the control arm, then I mean that's why the people who are on clinical trials are pretty brave. They're making a sacrifice for everyone else really. But yeah, that moment with my friend, not a moment. I mean, she's incredible, but I mean she's like a 1 in a million person. The doctor was a 1 in a million doctor, and I was just fortunate enough to somehow provide her with a map of who to see and how to navigate through this world of clinical trials, because that's something that I think folks don't realize is based on where you are in your line of therapy, that determines what your access to clinical trials is. So she had finished first line, she was about to go into second line therapy, then she stopped and she started looking for clinical trials in that second line setting. And I think that's what allowed her to get access to that phase 1 trial that ultimately saved her life. So I
Well,
think that's the other thing that folks, I think when someone gets diagnosed with cancer, they should understand the world of clinical trials and how whatever therapy you get impacts your ability to join other trials. I think that's a very important subtlety that I don't think people understand when they get diagnosed with cancer. And I don't think the doctors may explain that every day in the clinic, in the
mm.
community as well.
Much of your current work is at the intersection of content generation and AI, really helping aggregate, analyze, and amplify the insights of different clinical opinion leaders across social media and conferences. How do you see this technological intersection really changing the way doctors, patients, and the industry really learns and collaborates?
Yeah, I mean, what it does, I think probably from what I'm seeing is it gives you the ability to evaluate points of view on a PhD level. It's like you've got this PhD at your fingertips. And, so a doctor, when you look through, let's say, social media postings, and a doctor makes a statement about the drug, and then another doctor makes a statement about the drug, it's hard to understand all of that. And then every once in a while, you see a doctor make a really negative statement about a clinical trial, and you're like, "Wow, are they in left field?" Well, AI helps you understand that. Like you could just take that statement from the doctor, upload the publication, and say, this doctor made this statement. Please review the publication and let me know if the doctor makes sense. And then the AI will tell you yes or no. And then you could take that and maybe take it to another AI and say, this is what Claude said. Perplexity, what do you think? Or ChatGPT, what do you think? So what it does is it allows you to understand arguments really quickly, or find the arguments that are out there and get research, or has anyone else ever made this argument? An AI can help you with that. So I think it allows, these are discussions that usually happen like at this, the I don't know, like this the top layer, right? The stratosphere, right? So you've got the doctors discussing these data at the stratosphere level, and all of us are down here, and they talk to each other, and we don't really know. Well, now as they talk to each other, we could take that, and now we've got like this tool that allows us to understand it in our own terms. Like, what are they discussing? Why is this important? What is this based on? What are the implications of this discussion? And that's really valuable. And I think it's gonna I think it's gonna help us as as patients, and or even as taxpayers, that spend a lot on healthcare, and or the public. It'll help and caregivers, patients, etc. It'll help us keep those doctors at that upper stratosphere a little bit more, I don't wanna say keep them more honest, but keep them more accountable, because I think that sometimes they may not be discussing some of the complexities that we should, as patients, should understand, and I think that those are some of the things that I think AI will help us out with. If anything, I think you could take these very, very, very intricate, complicated discussions, and the AI can help us all understand it just at our fingertips. I think that's amazing. We've never had anything like this. It's fascinating. Now there's things with hallucinations and things like that, and the AI tools are getting better and better. But I think that's probably the thing I've learned the most is you could take these complicated discussions and the AI will really help you understand them.
Speaking about different changes, social media is now central to rapid knowledge exchange among oncologists and clinical experts. So, how have you really seen online discussions and digital content transform the speed and the quality of medical learning compared to, let's say the early 2000s?
I mean, it's just crazy now. The early 2000s are like, I mean, those look like the days of like a horse-drawn carriage. I mean, those days, I mean, I can't believe we even like healthcare even existed back then when I look at what's going on now. I mean, you've got doctors that are, um, these are like research leaders, they're clinical leaders, they're in academia, they're either professors, assistant professors, and they're creating content for their peers online. They're just putting it out there in really detailed graphics in tweets, or they're creating, their graphics for YouTube interviews that they do. They're sharing their slides. They're doing Substacks. I saw a doctor share some AI hacks the other day. A myeloma expert, Dr. Fonseca, was sharing how he's using AI to prep for an upcoming myeloma conference. He's sharing that online. I think I'm amazed by it. I think, we take for granted how brilliant like these doctors are and how curious they are. And I love seeing how they're embracing this technology and using it to teach one another. And I think it's amazing. I think the level that we're at now is only gonna it's like we're on this like exponential path right now. And I think social media and AI are really sort of working together in a synergistic manner to help accelerate that too. And of course you need the digital opinion leader doctors feeding the content. So I think, their brilliance, the way that they collaborate on social media, and then the new therapies we have that they're excited about, all of these things are combining to a place that's like night and day compared to where we were in the early 2000s.
You've emphasized the power of AI tools to quickly synthesize, vast online conversations for real world impact. What are maybe the biggest upsides and challenges as you kind of build these tools out for oncology and beyond into healthcare?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. I think as an entrepreneur, the thing you learn is like I could spend a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of, developers' time developing something that ChatGPT and Perplexity roll out like next month. So what I just developed is just not even nearly as good as what they made, and what they made is free or whatever, pennies on the dollar, and I may have spent 4 months working on that. So it's kind of where we are now. Like you got to jump on the moving sidewalk, and it's moving really fast. I think with regards to what I'm trying to do is how do I enable people to get the most from AI? That's kind of where I'm heading. How do I help people organize data so that they can use an AI tool to apply the tool onto the data, or whether it's if they want content creation out of that data or analytics out of that data, additional insights. Could be a lot of things, could be visualizations. But I think that's going to be the key. And that's kind of where I'm focusing now is helping develop a structure where folks can take the data they really care about and accelerate that through an AI, the AI toolkit, if you will. Because there's a lot of toolkits like, there's GPT, there's Claude, there's Perplexity, there's Gemini, and every one of them, there's Grok, and every one of them is getting better and better. So how do I take the stuff that I really care about and accelerate that through the toolkit? That's what I'm trying to do with KOL Pulse now, is really take the key opinion leader data and make it very flexible and efficient for people to take that data and use it for the various applications they want to use it in.
Your story really highlights how misinformation and institutional resistance can harm patients. For example, discouraging genetic testing for critical lung cancer mutations. And so, what lessons do you hope the industry takes from your experience to prevent similar failures happening in the future?
Yeah, I think that the industry needs to look at the folks that are isolated more. Look at the folks that nobody likes. Look at the folks, the statements that are unpopular, and maybe embrace those every once in a while, because maybe those people are right. Maybe the consensus culture is creating these blinders. I think that's what, like, I do this network visualization sometimes with one of my AI tools, and you'll see. So I've got you've got like the node of the person that does the tweet, and then you've got every dot is a retweeter, and then you've got networks that cluster together. So you'll see all these doctors will talk, and they've got their networks, their shared networks, and it's a little cluster. Then every once in a while, you'll see somebody way out there, and it's like they're in outer space, totally disconnected. And they make a statement, and it's like everybody's afraid to retweet it. Everybody's afraid to reply to it. That statement may be very valuable. There may be a lot to that. I think to some extent we're getting you know, I'm seeing within lung cancer, there's within EGFR mutations, a lot of the new data is about combining the pill Tagrisso with chemotherapy, or combining or going with other combinations versus a single agent pill. Well, obviously a pill is a lot easier for a patient to deal with. There's side effects, but Tagrisso side effects are minimal, I would say, compared to chemotherapy or some of the other, monoclonal antibodies out there. So, but a lot of the data is around kind of intensive dose and, treatment intensification of these patients. And there's some doctors out there who, are just saying, no, why are we doing this to these patients? I was doing some research, and Dr. Prasad, who works at the FDA, before he went to the FDA, was very critical of these treatment strategies. And I wish some more of his peers would pay attention to that, because I think he's a researcher. I think his perspective is valuable. And I'm wondering if we're going down this path of intensifying treatment to patients without knowing who should really get the intensified treatment. So I'm not sure, based on like what Dr. Prasad said, if we've got all this movement and momentum into this new treatment paradigm that's actually really in the right direction. Like, should the doctors pause and say, wait a minute, does Dr. Prasad, who was out here in left field, is he right? Like, should we tone it down? And there's a big meeting coming up called the World Lung International Association for the Study of Lung Cancer, IASLC. They've got the World Congress of Lung Cancer meeting next week. And a lot of that meeting is around these treatment intensification strategies. And I'm wondering if maybe, I don't know, his peers should take a step back and say, wait a minute, like, should we have all this noise about treatment intensification when we don't even know who it should be intensified in? And that anyway, that's just I guess something I'm identifying today, like an observation from today.
Given your unique vantage point, how do you think technology, transparency, and open digital dialogue can help ensure that patients get the right care and the latest evidence based treatments?
I think a good example is, so there's this website called Open Payments, and it's a openpayments.gov, and it's a government's website. It's Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS runs it. And so basically, if a doctor gets like this San Pellegrino, if I went to a breakfast and I'm a doctor and Pharma gives me the San Pellegrino, then I'll have $1.50 in open payments from that drug company will show up. And then, or it could be millions of dollars in associated research that comes through let's say, the academic center I work at. I think if you're a patient, the doctors don't do things for money, but I think the money has an impact on subtly. There's a subtlety in the way the money impacts their tone on some of these clinical trials. So when you look at a tweet, from a doctor, that they may be excited. And sometimes doctors are just excited to have new therapies. Like they're generally positive people. So I think it's easy to sort of characterize their enthusiasm as as sort of a endorsement. I think that's something that I think I'm learning, because I look at tweets all day long from key opinion leaders, and I think they are enthusiastic. A lot of times they have relationships with some of the people in these companies, so they are collectively excited about the data, but that they do have a financial relationship with the company. It is what it is. So I think that's something that I've learned, is a lot of this enthusiasm. I don't want to say, I'm not being critical of it, but I think as a patient and a caregiver, and someone who's doing research in the space, it's easy not to understand what's guiding a lot of that enthusiasm in a tweet, if that makes sense. I think that, just an example, if it's a pretty active speaker for a company, they're going to be really positive about a lot in the context of a lot of their tweets, because if you're a company that does podcasts, for instance, you want positive people to be on your podcast. So I think there's a lot of that going on, and I think that understanding, I would say for every I would say, there's that term, trust but verify. That's the way I would handle social content from physicians. If you see somebody who's real positive about something and a crowd that's real positive about something, do your best to find the alternate perspective and then do your research from there. That would be probably my best piece of advice. But yeah, there's a lot of hype in medical social media, and it's getting more hyped too.
Absolutely. And basically, you're just saying it's best to be mindful, right, where people's associations lie. So I think that's perfect
Well,
advice.
yeah, and and one other thing too. I'm sorry, you really helped me remember to bring this up, because I think it's AI is influenced by this hype too. So you can add a lot. I did this research the other day on a clinical trial. It was a phase 1 trial with a lot of drama around it for melanoma. And when in my initial questions to the AI tools, everything was super positive based on what was in the media. And a lot of the media was controlled by biotech, biopharma. And then I just asked another clarifying question, said, well, what are the negatives about this? Or I gave it a little piece of perspective from like a negative opinion. And so, what about this perspective? The AI totally flipped around after that. So I think that's the other frightening thing about where we are today, is the AI tools on the level are very much influenced by medical hype. So I think anyone using an AI tool needs to understand that and be able to, it doesn't take much to dig through the hype, but you've got to understand that the first response from AI is pretty much going to be hype driven, because that's the way it's trained.
You've had to as well reinvent your professional identity as well as your business after such a high profile whistleblower case. What advice would you give to others facing similar crossroads in healthcare or biotech?
That's a really good question. I would say I would reach out to people who've been in your situation. That's something I'm not good at. I think I would go out of your way to find people that have been through what you've been through, and reach out to them and learn what they've learned. And think, I would say the other thing is to try to keep your mentors going when your case goes public. I wasn't brave enough to do this. This is just my advice, is to reach back out to your mentors and try to reestablish those relationships, because it's not easy when you burn it all down. That's what I've learned. I think, yeah, I mean, it's that's I think if you could if you can, because it is, if you're a whistleblower and you did the right thing, then that doesn't mean, like, why are you burning down your network of people and your mentors? That you shouldn't do that. But I think we do. We kind of, we've been isolated for so long. We just stay in our cave, and then we don't. It takes courage to go back out.
Okay. In one sentence, what's the biggest opportunity for AI to improve oncology care today?
Yeah, I'd say access to clinical trials for patients and their caregivers and their clinicians. I think that's the number one thing that AI could really help improve care and clinical trial enrollment, clinical trial understanding, all of that. Yeah, clinical trials is the number one opportunity for AI, I think, right now.
And my last question for you is, what recent developments in digital health or patient advocacy most renews your optimism for the future?
I think I would say the we're seeing a lot of these digital opinion leaders take on significant roles, either in their institutions, in academia, or even in government. Like Dr. Vinay Prasad was, he's a researcher and he was a, leader in social networking, digital content for physicians and especially oncologists on Twitter. He had a podcast, he had a Substack, he was on YouTube, and he's he's in one of the top jobs at the FDA right now. Dr. Aaron Goodman just joined a really big clinic out of Las Vegas as one of the leaders. I think he's setting up a bone marrow transplant clinic and CAR T therapy center there. Dr. Al Hadidi, he just took on a major role. He just announced on Twitter. Dr. Stephen Liu and Dr. Chul Kim are in some of the top jobs at Georgetown, and they're both digital opinion leaders. So I think that's what we're seeing is the doctors that focus on content creation and developing relationships with their colleagues online, or their careers are growing. They're becoming leaders. So I think that's probably one of the best things that I've seen in recent history is just how these. No, and then Dr. Jack West, he's a senior leader at Summit Therapeutics, and then Dr. Nathan Pennell, he just took on I think he's in charge of medical affairs or he's like the VP of medical at Bristol Myers Squibb. There's just, so these thought leaders in the digital opinion leader space are all now among the true leaders in healthcare. And I think that's one of the most exciting things to see. Like, and that's all happened within the last year and a half as well.
Well, Brian, I want to say thank you for allowing us to go through your transformative journey and all the lessons that you've had from there. What's some final thoughts that you have for the audience?
Yeah, I think I'd say the final thoughts are just, we're in a really exciting time right now. I think so. Embrace it. This is this is almost like the creation of the steam engine back in the day, or the car. I mean, I mean, we've all been around for the iPhone. This is surpassing that. I remember the early days of the internet. This is surpassing that. It's just what we will be able to accomplish in the next few years is just going to be incredible. So I would sort of embrace the time we're in right now, especially the folks in healthcare. We're going to be able to make some real differences in folks' lives with what we create. And I think for the creators out there, the entrepreneurs, I think it's frustrating, but just be happy with what we've got, because it's easy to get frustrated. The tools we have now are just incredible. I would have begged to have access to tools like this back in the day, and now they're just at my fingertips. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time. We just have to kind of embrace the time, and I think do the most with what we've got, because the tools we have now are just incredible. So that's my final thoughts, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Well, again, thank you for your time. Where can people choose to connect or follow with you if they choose to do so?
Yeah, sure. Probably the best way is on Twitter. My Twitter ID is Mr. Pug 94. I had a pug back in the day when I created that. So Mr. Pug 94. And then KOL Pulse. If you look up, it's KOL Pulse is the app I'm developing. So if you want to follow KOL Pulse, just follow KOL Pulse on Twitter, and you'll see what I'm up to. And I share a lot of content. I'll be sharing a lot of content this week with the World Lung Cancer meeting, and the exciting data coming out of that too. So those are the best ways to follow me and see what I'm up to. And LinkedIn, of course, too. I share a lot on LinkedIn, either on the KOL Pulse site or my own page on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me. I enjoy connecting with people and meeting new folks as well.
Well, Brian, thank you for your time on the
Thank you,
K
Mezue.
in Clarity podcast.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. Have a great day.
Of course. You too.